I'd like to call to order the Thursday, August 10th, 2023 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Yes. Brink.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Aletsky.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Colhane. Oh, he's not online. Okay, so Colhane, Spire, Dargits, Johnson and Ford are absent. We have a quorum. And so with 5 members, then we need 4 votes for a conditional use to pass.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
Motion a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on, item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the July 20th, 2023 meeting.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Any additional discussions on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
That'll carry. Moving on to item 5 on the regular agenda is a conditional use request for 3 and 4 family dwelling units in the R2A district. Brandy, can you walk us through this?
Yes, thank you, Blake. So this is a conditional use request for the property at 512 9th Street Northeast. And I'm waiting for GIS to load here. So it is currently 2 legally described properties, and right now it's 1 parcel because it has 2, it's under 2 ownership, or it's under single ownership. So the applicant is asking that a conditional use be granted for the current zoning designation of R2A, Single Family Attached District, but then to allow for 3 or 4 dwelling units on the lot. And I will say that we did look into rezoning to R3 as an initial option, but this way then it adds that protection that you can't do more than 3 or 4 dwelling units on the property. That's the max, and keeping it in the current zoning designation. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Yeah, so definitely have some questions on this. And I guess first and foremost, the conditional use for the district in R2 allows for 3 and 4 family units. But because we're talking about a single parcel with 2 4 units, you know, that's the equivalent of 8 dwelling units on a single parcel. So how
Yep.
does that come?
So it's
together?
actually, they're 2 platted lots. So how it's written in the R2A district is that if it is an existing lot, so the parcel is just because it's under common ownership, but they are actually 2 platted lots. So they would still have to meet setbacks and whatnot, but each lot has a building right,
So the setbacks would be on the individual lots or on the parcel itself?
individual lot, if that's how they wish to develop it.
Are they going to separate out the legal descriptions then?
They are.
Have them taxed separately and everything like that?
Yep, if they develop them separately.
Okay.
Brandy, does the property have to get replatted? Because the legal description looks like it actually has, lots 9 and 10 and then 27 feet of lot 8. So is it kind of like 3 lots then, or 2?
So it's 2 full platted lots with a portion of an adjacent lot. So once I can get over there, I don't know where this is taking me. Let me just manually go there. Sorry about this, guys. Technology. Can't keep up. Okay, so this is the lot we are looking at here. I'll select it. And then I will also turn on the layers so you guys can see how this is actually platted. So there you can see it is a portion. So the adjacent property to the north also has a portion of lot 8. So what else about the R2A is you can't increase density. So the fact that one lot will technically be eliminated because it's a partial anyway, so then it loses its buildable right. But if it's a platted lot of record, it does have a building right.
But if we were to move forward with an approval on this, a requirement could be to require a replat of equal distances so that you have wider lots and we're not building over lot lines, and we're not increasing the density by doing that.
Correct, and we would require a replat even if it wasn't a condition, because that's in our subdivision regulations. Because we can't issue a building permit that would allow them to build over lot lines.
So who makes the recommendation on what the lot width would be if we're replatting it?
It has to at least be 50 feet,
Okay.
and they cannot create more than 2.
But if we were to make a recommendation that it's an equidistance, that would be the plat. So that you'd have two equally sized lots.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
The other concern that I had, Brandy, is that typically when we review these conditional uses like this, we come in with a site plan and we come in with an application that has addressed some of the common questions like are called out in B, C, E, and G related to things like screening, parking requirements. None of those seem to have been addressed, and there is no site plan for this.
That is correct. So kind of the way we've been moving is it's not a requirement for their application. Now, however, A through H should be addressed, but I think that, all of our ordinance requirements for parking, landscaping, green space, things of that nature would be addressed at the time of building permit issuance. So I don't think that plans have probably been set for what they would do.
However, the board has authority exceeding the ordinance regarding adding conditions that may come up during the course of a meeting where it could address lighting or screening or things that may be
Per bedroom.
different, more
That-
restrictive than what's in the standards. And so sometimes
Yep.
I understand the need that we've been going that way. Sometimes when you're talking about a redevelopment area, I think it's probably even more important than even on a virgin piece of ground, that we're kind of like seeing what a general layout is going to be, how the parking, where the lighting is going to be, the screening. So I know we're trying to walk a fine line on what's too much information and what's not information, but sometimes it is difficult to envision that, not only from a board perspective, but I also think from the public's perspective as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I
those
can
have
give
been
you
common
kind of-
areas that we have applied conditions in the past, too.
I'll give you guys examples too, I guess, in the neighborhood where these are, I think these are duplexes, but, so it would be, so the max that they could do, and you can see, even if these are duplexes, which we might need confirmation on that. But the amount of space that a duplex would take up, and then they would need to have off-street parking met as well. So what would really fit on there?
Yeah, that's part of the concern here, right, is that, they're asking for one thing, they haven't provided a site plan, they haven't really addressed some of those conditions. It doesn't look like physically they can get what they want to get on this lot. So to me, it seems like an incomplete application.
Well, and I think too, the applicant is here, that he might be able, if we'd open the public hearing, he might be able to answer some of those.
I'll open the public hearing at this time, if the applicant wants to come forward.
Hi there, Les McElhaney, and me and Josh are partners on this deal. What you would envision is the setback, one unit on the north side and one unit on the south side. There'd be some parking in the front and also a drive in between the two buildings to some parking in the back.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
New sound system. So Les, are you saying that the doors, the entrances into these units would be facing the north and south?
They would be, yeah, facing the center.
I'd be driving in and to the right, these doors, or to the left are these doors.
So I did some looking, because I assumed that's the direction that you were intending to go on that property. If you look on the other side of the intermediate school there where Jefferson Court is, they've got those apartment buildings. They've got a parking lot and drive in between the two buildings. It's about 66 feet just in the parking surface and drive. And then you take off setbacks on top of that on either side of each building. You don't leave yourself with a lot of buildable room.
Yeah, there'd be enough, basically, your drive is only gonna be for your tenants to get to your back parking.
Blake, is this what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Because that would be,
Well,
those are quite a
a
bit.
little bit further to the west where they got the main Jefferson Circle there. So they've got the parking, I guess, in between the buildings. You're saying parking would go behind the building
Behind the building.
and facing towards the structures?
The parking will be behind the building. They'll access it to the parking. And that'll basically just be a private drive in between there. That won't be a public access. That'll just be if that's where your parking spot is.
Do you want to draw it quick and then I'll put it?
I mean, it seems like you've thought about this and probably have some illustrations to understand what you're thinking. I'd certainly like to see that as part of the application process here.
Go to my 308 and 314 13th Street Southwest.
Okay,
It's the same setup.
1308,
308 and 314,
14th.
13th Street.
If I could, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I could elaborate a little bit on what Brandy, Ms. Hanton, Community Development Manager, was touching on a minute ago about what's in the application. The city, as we've continued to evolve with our subdivision regulations and try to streamline and make things as conducive as possible to getting applications processed in a timely manner and things of that nature. This is one of those components where, while, I understand the desire and benefit to having a diagram that would show the exact layout of the high-density residential buildings along with, the parking area and things like that. I guess the point I'm trying to make, and I think what Brandy was trying to emphasize, is the technical details behind the size of that structure, the setbacks, the required spacing or the required parking stalls for the units. All those things would undoubtedly be checked off at the time of building permit. And I just wanted to let the board, have a little bit of ease there to know that those things are thoroughly vetted at the time of the building permit. So if they submit a building plan to us that doesn't show those things meeting the criteria in our zoning ordinances and in our subdivision regulations, they would not receive a building permit for that type of structure or use. And so it is a fine line of how much information is too much. And to Councilman Kay's point, we're trying to continue to Commissioner Kay's, trying to walk that fine line on what's being required of the applicant at the time of application before they even have approval to move forward with such project. And so that's why we've scaled back some of those requirements. And but rest assured, they are still vetted at the time of a building permit, and they would not receive a building permit if they don't meet all the requirements in the zoning ordinance and subregs.
And I agree, Mr. Chair, that I think the issue is the Board of Adjustment is given the authority to take a look at every conditional use permit and attach conditions where they seem fit and they have a rational nexus to the decision. And there are specific requirements, A through H or whatever, that we're supposed to look at. One of them is general compatibility. And so a use by itself, a 3 or 4 unit use, might be on the surface by ordinance generally compatible, but if the adjoining property owners or the board themselves can't visualize what that may look like, and maybe the person's going to come in and they're going to go with a maximum 35-foot tall fourplex adjacent to this that's going to be looking down, maybe that fourplex isn't going to be generally compatible with the adjoining properties, and the neighborhood doesn't have any clue that that's coming before them until after the building permit's been issued and the structure has gone up. And then they're going to be coming back, well, why the hell did you permit something like that? Because it's not compatible, it doesn't fit in with the general character of our neighborhood, whether it's causing shade on my property that it didn't have before. I had a nice big garden next door to me. I'm just using this as a for instance. And so I'm not sure how we balance that in, but if I'm a neighbor to this proposed development, and they're saying, well, they're just going to put a fourplex or a threeplex in, or 2, 3, 4plexes in on this property, you know, how is that going to look? And I'm not saying anything negative about your project, Les. I'm just saying that I think sometimes the public can be shortchanged when we don't provide them with enough information so that they feel like they're getting their issues addressed. And maybe there's nobody here to complain or have an issue with it, but those are just some of the things that I think about in the sense that if we're supposed to be looking at conditional use permits and assessing them, how they fit. You guys are going to assure, I have every confidence that staff will make sure that you're meeting the bare minimum requirements of the ordinance. That's not what I'm saying.
So,
Yeah, and if I could, to that point very well taken, the thing where we always want to strive to do though is take as much subjectivity out of these decisions as possible. And because we don't have design criteria for conditional uses in the city of Watertown, which is a benefit that some zoning ordinances do have in other communities, where if they don't meet these design criteria, bing, bang, boom, it's very objective. We don't have that here in Watertown. So it tends to lean a lot more subjectively in our decision-making, and we're trying to get out of that the best we can, again, while balancing this fine line. So then what else do we have objectively to lean into? It's all the rest of the zoning ordinance. There are height restrictions on buildings and zoning and different building types. There are setback requirements. There are off-street parking requirements. Those are the objective things that we as staff are trying to hang more of our hats on in these decision-making processes and make it all the less subjective for the applicants and for the community as a whole.
And I think for a lot of those, it does work to lean on the ordinance. Parking requirements, for instance, it's spelled out very clearly, right?
Screening is not.
Screening is not.
Yeah.
The refuse is not. And when I look at the questions on the form for the application and it says NA for refuse, I mean, certainly there's going to be trash, right? I mean, that's one of the things I'm supposed to be evaluating.
Yeah, and me and Josh both I've been at and in the rental business for 30 years. I want something that is workable.
Right.
And the trash, yes, it needs to work for me, for the tenant, and also for the sanitation department. And I understand that, and that will be taken care of and will be addressed.
I think where I'm at with this is, I don't necessarily disagree with the project here. I think that what we're looking at is incomplete at this point in time. I'd certainly like to look at this as a complete proposal.
So if I could just say too, that's where this discussion is where those answers can come from. And you guys can, and that's where you could also set a condition to say that this is only 15 feet high, whatnot, probably 20. But so that you aren't, that's where you can put some conditions on what they're proposing.
I guess where I agree completely with what Mr. Van Eye has said, Public Works Director Van Eye has said that, the ordinance will take a lot of it, but letter H, general compatibility, while it is subjective, and unless you have form-based zoning or specific requirements within each district, there will be subjectivity. And I do know that subjectivity can get us into trouble if we're not treating people equitably on similar requests, and that, moving forward, it's been deposed on this more than once in my professional career. And so I want to make sure that we take subjectivity out, and if we're thinking that if the use is listed, it's generally compatible, I'm fine with that moving forward. And then we don't have to worry about that. And that's kind of where I would like to be going at some point in time. If we're going to be going down this route, then we're going to say, well, if it's a listed use, it's generally compatible, and that becomes a bylaw for us, and we don't have to worry about letter H when we're issuing the CUP, that's fine. And then we can get by with not having enough information to say whether or not it's compatible or not, because we've already made that decision.
But that's where too, I mean, they could provide you with a picture of what it's going to be. And if you guys don't set conditions, there's nothing that's holding them to that either.
Right. Just what would
Yeah.
be written in ordinance, right? I'm not pointing I'm not pointing fingers at staff or the applicant or anything. It's just more of a kind of trying to wrap my head around, where we're going as a board, purpose of the board when attaching, CUPs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, definitely.
And for the application at hand, I would encourage, if there are any questions tonight that they may be able to field, to lead us to a point of action, that'd be beneficial. And if through discussion it's not quite there, we could take that direction as well, so.
So I would like to, if Les, you've got an actual, I know where you're talking, I've been by your other place, but if you could show that up, is that how?
Yeah,
this
I
is
have
what
it
you-
highlighted.
This is what you're kind of thinking about doing similar to this, right?
Yeah, this is one that I own over 308 and 314 13th Street Southwest. It's going to be similar to this with a drive in between, one unit on the north, one unit on the south. And we will meet all of the parking requirements. What I find here, the refuse it's best to not try and turn that great big dump truck, garbage truck in through there. Do a fenced refuse there out on the street. Curbside mail delivery, but it would look similar to this unit here.
And those are fourplexes or two duplexes?
Those are fourplexes.
Okay, Les, is that lot over there on the southwest part of town, is that roughly the same size of lot that you want to put here? So that driveway is going to be as wide as that driveway is there?
It'll be a little narrower. That north building is actually oversized. That was a moved-in structure. And that one is quite a bit, that building is quite a bit bigger than what the picture depicts. It's 40 feet wide. So, but it'll be generally real close to that.
But the driveway.
Will
the
be a
driveway
two-way-
Between the two buildings is
There'll
going to
be
be
enough
that wide.
room
It's not
for
gonna
two
be a one-car.
vehicles, yeah.
Okay.
The driveway is quite large on that one.
Yeah.
And so that is 160 feet. This one's 107. And like he said, 160. Yep. And then this
Wide.
is, yep,
And this one's 107, so it's 60 feet narrower,
But deeper.
but deeper, yeah.
And how many bedrooms per unit?
2 bedrooms per unit. And 1 parking stall per bedroom.
16 parking.
Yes.
off-street.
Yes.
Could you zoom into that image again, where the proposed development is going to be? I just wanted to get another quick look-see again at the adjoining properties.
Because it's
This is the
9-foot
lot.
setbacks, right?
Yes.
6.
Because
And
it's
if
R2A.
if he subdivides them equally, then if he is over, if he's back to 75, then it would be 9.
But from a density standpoint, we're talking 8 units on this parcel. R3 setbacks would require significantly higher setbacks, right? Both side yard, front yard,
And the potential that they would be able to do more units.
right? But that's also dictated by lot size. So if you had 2 bedrooms per unit and you had 8 dwelling units, it would take a lot of 13,600 square feet. This lot is 13,696. So you're maxed out in R3.
Okay.
So you're running already the maximum density that the R3 even supports.
Got over here.
I don't know if you guys have read the the housing study that was just put out, that was just updated, says we have 550 immediate need for rental units. I have over 200 rental units. I do not have a two-bedroom apartment. I don't know how many calls I've fielded in the last 10 days. I don't have one. But what this housing study also says is to develop affordable housing, you don't do it out in the new development. You do it by redeveloping areas in town. This is what I'd consider a blighted lot. It's had a tore-down house in it. It's been sitting there doing nothing. A good location. Now, we're not generally targeting student housing. I think it may be 25% because your 8 ground floor units are going to be no steps. They're going to appeal to your seniors. Go and try and find an apartment that doesn't have steps. Very hard, especially at this price point. And so I think the bottom 4 are going to, or 8, 4 in each building, are going to fill with probably your seniors. So it fits both, and it fits just exactly what the housing study, their recommendations.
I guess my initial concerns was, again, not knowing enough about the design to start with, not knowing that there was 3 2.5 lots, whatever here, not knowing that I was going to have a single unit on a single lot. Those are the things that I did not know coming into the meeting. And so that has assuaged some of the things that I was thinking about before. And I think, again, relying on staff to make sure that the parking requirements are there. I guess I'd like to know if there's anybody from the neighborhood that wanted to comment on this before we get into that nuts and bolts.
Public hearing. Sorry, public hearing is open if you want to come forward. Just make sure you state your name for the record.
My name is Jeff Thronson, and I have a couple letters from individuals that couldn't make the meeting tonight. Can I turn them into somebody? Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Thronson. I am here today with my wife, Kay, and I have a few words to say in opposition to this request.
What's your address, sir?
525 9th Street Northeast. Right across the street, right there. Okay, we have lived at this residence since 1978. We raised 3 children here. It was once a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, but as the city grew and as LATI expanded, we have noticed more people, more traffic, more noise in our neighborhood and on our streets. We now have 6 duplexes between 4th Avenue Northeast and 7th Avenue Northeast, along with 2 duplexes right around the corner. In my opinion, the responsibility of city government is to ensure the safety and welfare of its citizens, and allowing 2 multi-level fourplexes to be built in an area populated with mostly single-family houses is not in the best interest of the residents who live in this area who will be affected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional comments from the public?
This is Kenneth DeGoss, and I know Jeff had a letter from us because we are out of town on vacation, but I thought this was very important for us to attend, so I am calling in. So I wasn't able to see any of the diagrams or any of the information that was shown. But we live adjacent to that property at 524 9th Street Northeast, and we are also opposed to the bringing in of a fourplex because it does not fit the neighborhood, but also fourplexes and those types of buildings would increase the traffic along with turnover rate, and with us having 3 smaller kids, there are security concerns with that as well. There was talk that these buildings would be, 30 plus feet, so, you're able to look into our privacy fence as well. So we don't believe there's also fears of, property loss value because no one's gonna wanna move into a fourplex and move into a house next to fourplexes. So I think, having that type of environment, especially when there are a bunch of duplexes in the area, that's more, staying within the aesthetics of the neighborhood, but fourplexes or a threeplex would be not within that area.
Thank you, sir.
There is concern. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate it. Like I said, there's noise increase. We're gonna be right next to it. You're talking about college students. We've all been, most people have been to college. There's gonna be noises. There's gonna be an increase of that, especially if you now move from one family to 8 families. There's concerns with that. And then, parking, you're talking 2 parking spots for every unit. You're gonna have friends and family over. That neighborhood isn't big enough to support all that parking.
Sir, if you could think of anything that would mitigate the potential impact to your property or the neighborhood property, if you were to suggest any conditions to be placed upon this, do you have anything, or do you feel that there's nothing that could be done to mitigate the impact?
With putting up 2 fourplexes, I don't think there's anything to do to mitigate that impact, because you're taking an area that had one house on it and now saying, hey, here's 8 families who are gonna be living here. There's all of that there, and like I said, it's gonna, if we ever try to resell our house, who's gonna wanna move into to 2 fourplexes? And then having, like I said, 3, one has a teenage daughter, so, unfortunately, she's a looker, so, and then I have 2 smaller kids, so you don't know the type of residents you're gonna get in there. I know there's thoughts that it's gonna be elderly on the bottom because of that, but you don't know who you're gonna get until you fill out those applications, and then you're gonna have the students.
Let me approach it from this angle, sir. What if it wasn't 2 fourplexes, but 2 duplexes?
I guess that would fit within the community, right? So there's already 4plex there. Or not 2plex, but they already have duplexes there.
They could do that by
Ideally, we would
permitted
want
use.
just one- Ideally, we want 2 duplex,
But theoretically,
but a fourplex is, okay, go ahead.
I guess theoretically where I was getting at is they could theoretically put 2 duplexes on this lot, and that would be 4 units, 8 cars.
Okay.
And I'm just saying, that's a permitted use by the ordinance today. And so the question is that they're asking to double that use. And so I'm trying to get, the leap from, we have a plethora of duplexes in the area right now. So I'm just wondering, duplexes would theoretically be fine because they are allowed by the ordinance, but it's the fourplex that's causing the problem.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Because like you said, you're not making an adjustment to the ordinance to put the duplexes on there. It's the fourplexes that you're gonna run into.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on.
Okay. My name's Sid Schnabel, and I live at 515 9th Street Northeast, which is right across the street from this. And when I retired about 5 years ago, I was looking for a quiet neighborhood to buy a house in. I didn't think a fourplex could be built in this neighborhood due to its zoning. At the time, a single house was right across the street. I'm concerned about parking, traffic, and noise that could come up with a fourplex. The property is only a couple blocks from Lake Area College, and I'm concerned the unit would be rented out to college students. They'll be moving in and out. Partying and late night noise would be a concern. I guess that's all I have. Thank you for listening to my concerns.
Thank you, sir. Any additional?
Hi, Brian Brandreit. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about, so I've been in the rental business 30-some years as well. I'm hearing a lot about all these people that rent, it sounds like they're all pretty bad people apparently. Les is, he's built a lot of properties, he's renovated. He's as good a landlord as there is in town. I think he keeps track of his tenants. I really don't see the neighborhood getting crazy because Les built something in town, and I know Josh as well. They're both very conscientious about that. We certainly need the housing, and this seems like a good area for it. I guess I don't see the issue, but.
Thank you, sir.
I'm so sorry.
Hello, my name is Al Young. I live 2 houses to the south of this, and a lot of the people kind of touched on everything I was going to talk about, the fourplex, and, one thing about the fourplex, you're going to get the seasonal renters, the tech students, different stuff like that. I know Les has probably got good tenants. He's a good landlord and different things like that, but it is, parties, late night, cops tearing up and down the roads. There's young families there right across the street from me, a daycare. And I don't think this is going to help my own personal property value either, or any of us. And just, you don't think this is a bad place for it, but ask yourself, would you want this next to your house? Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I'm sorry, what was your address again, sir?
Right here, Todd.
Right there, thank you.
Colin Paulson, and I generally don't have a feeling on either way on this project, but as a former council member, I just wanted to point out that we've seen quite a few of these come through lately in the past couple of years, and they're pretty fought by the neighborhoods. Any redevelopment cause. And with valid concerns, no doubt about it. But I just wanted to make the point where the developers that are putting money into this and come up with a plan for a site, come up with a plan that has to be financially feasible and that, goes for the long term. So a duplex might not work here, but an eightplex does because of the financial feasibility behind it. And obviously that comes with concerns as we're hearing tonight, but I just wanted to point out that we do have serious need for housing in this community. And what's the proper way to address it if we keep denying these? And that's the sentiment I've kind of carried on for the last 2 years too. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not advocating for this project. I'm not advocating against it. But I just wanted to point that out, that if we keep denying these things, we're never going to grow. We're never going to go forward or see a difference in our housing study or housing availability. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
My name is Jack Scott. I live at 535 9th Street. I've lived there for 49 years, raised my family. And when we moved in, there were cows and sheep to the east of us. And that's where the old junior high is now. And the Langenfeld farm was there. But I'm definitely against it. And I think what they should do is just look elsewhere in town. There's got to be other sites somewhere that would be compatible for this. And it would be fine for the elderly and for the young. But I just want you to know I'm definitely against it.
Thank you, sir. Any additional comments by the public? Yes, ma'am?
Hello, I'm Pauline Sturm. I live in that neighborhood, 604 9th Street. It's just up a few houses from there. And Mr. McElhaney is concerned about finding places for older folks to live. I'm an older folk, and I would not live in that neighborhood. I will not. If he has those for rent, I would never rent one of those places with all those kids around there. That's a Lake Area Tech area. There's kids all over. This is a residential area, and having everybody move, young kids moving in there. If you want us to build for the kids, build for kids, but not in a residential area where people have been living for years in single-family homes. Find someplace else to build.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Any online? We'll close the public hearing. Fundamentally, I'd love to see this area developed, and I think as permitting allows, 2 duplexes, as you mentioned, Todd, that seems like a really great use for the property. Not necessarily opposed to something else, but I don't condone maximum density according to the R3 zoning district on an R2A lot, and that's what we're looking at here with the proposal.
I'm just going to make a comment. I'm looking at the setback ordinance for the R2 A zone, and they have the reduction down to 6 feet, but there's a bullet that if the building gets over 10 feet or over 30 feet, the setbacks will be increased to 10. And since we don't know the layout of this building or what these buildings will necessarily look like, I was thinking I would make a shot at a motion, and my motion would be to approve the 2 duplexes or the 2 fourplexes, but I would stipulate that we include the 10-foot side yard setback since we don't know the height of the building.
I think it'd be appropriate too, because that's also the setback for an R3 zone, which is what this density matches.
Yep. So that's my motion.
Is there any concern for other areas of focus, such as screening? I know mention was made by the applicant that a fenced refuse area would be provided, but it's not included in the application.
If I still could, I would include that in my motion, that statement also gets added as a condition.
And the replatting.
Yes, and the replatting into 2 conforming R2A lots,
Equal size.
as long as they're conforming.
Okay.
And then there would be an access easement across both of those for both structures? Is that how you would do that?
Correct. And actually, because the lots have frontage, so we would just do an access easement. Otherwise, we would look into a private street. And when the lots are split evenly, then each one would have 53.5 feet with that 106 feet total. So in the R2A district, they would be allowed a 6-foot side yard setback. So if it goes up to 75 feet, that's when it's 9 foot. But all of these lots are 50 feet. So
What Mr. Brink was pointing out is that there is a caveat according to building height. So if it gets above a building height of 30 feet, it requires a 10-foot setback. And because the combined density of this is equal to an R3,
okay.
that's where the 10-foot came from.
Yeah. Right, yep.
Any conversation or discussion on screening on the north and south sides of the property? I'm not so concerned about screening on the east side adjacent to the school, but I don't know if there's any requirement for fencing or anything like that. Anybody, I mean, I'm just throwing out for conversation.
I think if we, personally, I feel that if we ask for the maximum setback by ordinance, which is the 10 feet, I think that would create that buffer space.
Okay.
Historically, we have required screening on parking lots, in particular if parking lots are going to be adjacent to residential properties.
That is by ordinance.
Oh, okay. So then they would have to have a fence like
On the east side.
just on the parking lot, not the building part?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that caveat in ordinance apply to residential, adjacent to residential, or just commercial and residential?
No, anything adjacent to residential, any off-street parking.
So I guess I'll kind of restate my motion since there was a little bit of discussion there. It's a motion to approve with 3 conditions. 1, that they screen their refuse. 2, that they have 10-foot side yard setbacks to the north and south. And 3, that they replat this into 2 conforming R2A lots.
Can I make one suggestion? I feel like a screen would be more effective than making them go an extra foot for the neighborhood.
Well, and depending on what they build, I mean, if they build a building that's over 30 feet, that'd be required to anyway. I'm just saying that since we don't see the building, we don't have a picture of it, I don't know what it'll be, so I just was, because bullet C is the required yard will be increased to 10 foot when the building is 3 stories in height or more. So that's already in the ordinance.
They would have to do that then.
Right, right. And since I don't know exactly where the building will be and the neighbors in the audience don't know where the building would be, I'm just saying that that's, without a site plan, that's
10 feet.
That's 10 feet.
And I would just reiterate that if you look at this as a whole, it is R3 density, and it's maximum density for the combined lot size. And R3 requires a 10-foot side yard setback by ordinance.
No, and I'm good with, I understand that, but I was just thinking as far as protection goes, because just a suggestion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Let the record show also that Mr. Culhane has joined us.
Apologize for my tardiness.
Are we still at 4 votes or are we at 5 votes now?
Now we're at 5. Because
We have 6, so it's still 4.
All right, thanks.
So we need 4 yeses to approve. Is there any additional discussion? We have a motion on the table. We'll take,
I do just kind of want to say, I know these type of rezon or conditional uses are always difficult, but I do generally believe that if it's in our conditional use list, that it is generally approved with, or generally, not approved, but compatible, thank you, compatible if proper conditions are in place. So that's what I was shooting for when I made the motion.
I'm generally of the same boat that if we don't think we want those types of uses, then they should be removed from the ordinance. And once those uses have been placed, it's in the ordinance. The purpose of the conditional use hearing is not to say absolutely no, we don't like it, but how do we mitigate the impact on the neighborhood? And that's just my philosophy. Thank you.
my primary concern with this, and I definitely agree about redevelopment, and I certainly like to see this type of multifamily dwelling, especially adjacent to institutions like the schools, like the campuses, and in this region. We've talked about having, a campus district, and certainly multifamily dwellings in the area of campus district is appropriate. The problem that I have, though, is jumping from one density to the opposite extreme density. So, the problem here is if you actually look at the R3 zone and what minimum lot size is for the number of dwelling units, for the number of bedrooms, we're capped out at as much as R3 can support. So I think that's too big of a leap here in this particular area. If there's no additional comments, I will call roll.
Briefly, Chair. This particular kind of development is much maligned throughout the city. The problem is that anywhere you go in the city and try to build multifamily housing, you will run into folks, lovely folks like yourselves, that say, please build it somewhere else. I understand that feeling. It's frustrating. Frankly, I probably personally wouldn't want to live right next to a fourplex. But this is incredibly important development that occurs. These middle, it's called missing middle because frankly, the last 30 or 40 years, we haven't done a ton of this kind of development nationwide. And that's part of the reason why we're in a crunch right now for single-family housing, for housing generally. And I think that this kind of development, it isn't sexy, it isn't giant apartment buildings that cost $12, $15 million, but it's some of the most important redevelopment that occurs within our city. Our city grows, it's growing pains. The fact that we need student housing, or maybe it won't be student housing, maybe it will be. But the fact that we need that is a reflection of a vibrant, growing college in the community. I understand it. I was a college kid relatively recently. You know, I wouldn't have wanted to live necessarily right next to me, but hopefully the landlords will take good care. And if they don't, call the police. I mean, it's frustrating, I get it, but this is important development. And Commissioner Dolly's statements are compelling about the jump, but frankly, I don't see that big of a significant difference between 4 families and 8 families by that point either, so.
Mr. Chair, if I may as well, again, I think everyone here has a legitimate argument. I think one of the things you need to look at is these developers are local folks in town. They're readily available, accessible. And if there are problems, you know, with density and traffic, garbage, both Mr. Susi and Mr. McElhaney, I think, are very receptive to, you know, do what's best for the neighborhood. I get it. It's kind of the fear of the unknown. You don't know who you're going to get for neighbors, but I guess the same thing is when that piece of property came up vacant, you know, kind of your only protection is to, you know, scoop it up and buy it yourself if you don't want to see things change. Again, I think the positive is that we have local people that are doing local investment that are accessible. So that's all I have.
Thank you all. We'll take a roll call.
All right. Brink.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Dolly.
No?
Aletsky.
Yes.
We got 5 yes, 1 no. That'll carry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to item 6 is open public comments. If anybody wants to speak to the Board of Adjustment now on something that's not on the agenda, have a moment to do so. Is there any new business
No, none that I have.
from the board? No. Any old business?
Nope.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. We will be reconvening momentarily as the Plan Commission.
Study is on our website, available for the public to view. I pulled it up, I had some clips of that, so if anyone's interested.